Hi, welcome. I'm Lily from Pozark.com, and I'm here with Terry, who is my business partner in Pozark.com. And before we launch into our presentation today, I just wanted to say a great big thank you to Porn Harms for inviting us to be here today. It's really such an honor. Porn Harms is our absolute favorite go-to site for information about any aspect of anti-pornography movement, advocacy, whatever your particular interest is. They've got great videos and information. You can learn so much there. So we're really honored to be here.
Absolutely. Hello.
I also wanted to just say a quick thank you to Jeffrey Miller, our tech support, Michael, our tech support, and everybody who has logged in and is part of this chat today. I'm really so honored that you're spending this hour with us. And at the end of our presentation, we'll be taking your questions and we'll do our best to answer them.
Absolutely.
Yep. So just so you know, this presentation that we're going to do today is the first in a three-part series. And today is just going to be an overview of how pornography use in our partners really hurts us as partners.
And impacts us as much as hurts us. It has a real affect on our lives, much of which is pretty painful.
I'd say all of which is pretty painful.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to invite everybody, since we welcome your suggestions and your questions, and we are going to be here next week as well, if you could email us your questions, that would be wonderful, to info@posark.com. Posark stands for partnersofsexaddicts.com, POSARC.com, and we can that way have a look at the questions during the week. So at this point, I'm going to just I feel like I've been talking for 5 minutes, so why don't I ask you to maybe introduce Pozark and talk a little bit about just who we are, what we do.
Pozark is Partners of Sex Addicts Resource Center, and we strive to be a complete place where partners of porn users can come to and get answers. We are not 12-step based, we are trauma based, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, about how we came to that movement. And we have information about how it affects your relationship. We have information about how to deal with your partner's porn use, what you need to do yourself, what common reactions from other people are. Although there's commonality in the experience of being the partner of a porn user, there's some very unique places that each of us might find ourselves in, and we try to make our site accommodate all of those. We have book reviews, we have film reviews. There are many things pertaining to porn. When the latest research comes in, we review it and put it on our site. So that's what we're about.
Great.
Can you think of anything else you want to add to that?
Well, that's pretty good. I just wanted to say that Terry and I came up with two acronyms that we use rather freely, and it's possible if you're not familiar with our site already, you may not know what those acronyms stand for. We use the term POSA to describe ourselves, POSA, which is also the root of our website name, to refer to a partner of a sex addict. We find it an incredibly demeaning term when we're referred to as co-addicts. So we call ourselves POSAs, and we refer to the compulsive porn user in our life, or the sex addict in our life, as a SAC, which is an acronym for Sex Addict Compulsive, so SAC. So if you hear us using the terms POSA, that's us and you, and SACS refers to the sex addict.
Right.
And the other thing I just wanted to state is that we at Pozark work with everyone. We're gender neutral, and so what we know in our experience is that if your partner is using pornography and it's an issue for you, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It really doesn't. It's a kind of an equal opportunity heart destroyer.
Devastator.
Right. As a matter of fact, I just heard from an older gentleman who said that he was really devastated by his wife's pornography use, and she tried to include him in that. And he said, "Why? Why do you want to do that? Aren't I enough? Isn't what we have enough? Why?"
Oh, the same things that we women say. Okay, so
Exactly.
it's, mhm.
Yeah. And he was really shocked. He thought, "What's happened to my wife?" And she said, "Well, I just want to spice things up." And he was pretty unequivocal, and he said, "No, I'm not into that." And next thing he found out, a few months later, she started having affairs, and he contacted me at about the 3 year into the marriage point where she would not stop her pornography use and affairs, and he fully places the blame on her pornography use, feeling that that is what really eroded her sense of morality and values in their marriage. And so just to show it doesn't always have to be a woman who's affected, it can be a man.
So you heard pretty much the same story from
Sorry?
from with the genders reversed, because
Yeah,
I mean it
absolutely.
sounds like the same typical
Mm-hmm.
responses for the person, man and
Absolutely.
woman.
And just while we're on the topic, the first time I'd ever heard about porn addiction was a long time ago. It's probably 15 years ago, or right around the time the internet came out. And I was apprised of this by a dear gay male friend of mine who said his relationship of 20 years was sinking fast because he could not get his partner back into relationship with him. His partner was having a relationship, but it was with internet porn, not with him. So it's really a pretty equal opportunity affecting thing. So let's talk a little bit about the whole business of, does a woman or man, so we're just probably for ease of pronoun going to say woman or posa here, need to know if her partner is an addict or what the frequency of use is for this to be affecting her negatively.
Absolutely not. First of all, we can't make a diagnosis as to whether someone else is an addict. But what we can do is rely and trust our feelings and our sense of the situation. And really, even the smallest bit of discomfort is a signal, it's a sign. There's so much pressure on us in the culture, other people, this is normal, men do this, just accept it. There's so much on us that we diminish and minimize our own feelings. So even the mildest discomfort about a partner's porn use is sufficient to follow through on, because once, I know in my case, I was willing to override my feelings about the porn because there was so much pressure on me just to accept it, and it's normal, that's what guys do. However, I was very uncomfortable about it on the inside, and if someone would have stopped me and said, let's talk about this, let's what's really going on with this, it would have been a different story. I think I truly wish that I would have listened to that discomfort rather than saying, oh, I have to know he's a porn addict first. So I didn't know that.
Yeah, and from what I know about your story, you're dealing with all kinds of layers of trauma from having sold out to that voice of real knowing in you.
Exactly. My discernment was not in place at that time.
So what we do at Ozark probably goes hand in hand with how we started the site. And I will say that for me, as a partner at the time of a pornography addict, it was so incredibly painful because it was such a disconnect from who I thought he was and who he said he was, who his stated persona was in the world. It
And
was difficult.
invalidating for you.
Yeah.
It was deeply invalidating.
Terrible. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about that forever, but then I'm almost finished writing a book about that, so
I'll say more.
yeah, well, I'm almost done, and it really chronicles the journey of what I thought was a wonderful relationship to the discovery of this whole secret life that I thought was only porn, and then found out it was not just porn. And I really just kind of travel the arc and take the reader on it. But I want to say it's really important that this started out as my story, and I started talking to others about it because I was so in shock. And what I quickly found out was it was not just my story. It was going on in the lives of so many friends,
Right.
relatives. I would talk to people on the street. You know, in Manhattan, life is lived outside. And you just talk to everybody, and it just, it astounded me the degree to which pornography use was pervasive
Right.
and really hurtful to certain partners. And so that was my story and how I started writing the book. And also to say that my partner, who was incredibly shame-bound about having this addiction, I was lucky he did tell me when I discovered it that he was addicted to it.
Mhm.
So I didn't have that guessing game that I know so many partners struggle with.
Yeah.
But I really needed help, and what he basically mandated was that I not talk to anybody because he was so ashamed. So I don't want you to tell your therapist, and you're not going to go to a 12-step meeting, are you? What if somebody follows you home and sees where you live? And all of this stuff, which you can hear, that's really the impaired thinking of an active addict,
Mhm.
is to
So
care
what did
more
you-
about their own image than about how the pain that I was in.
Right.
Yeah, and so I just started writing and writing and writing, and I quickly started weaving in the stories of others, other women and the gay men and the straight men. Just everybody's story weaves into this, so it's quickly becomes, the personal became
The
global.
universal. Yeah.
And I kind of, and now from that I can talk about how you and I started sharing notes, because I know you had gone through it already.
Mhm.
And so why don't you talk a little bit about how POSAR came to be as a result?
Okay. When Lily contacted me, letting me know that unfortunately she was experiencing what I had been through, both Lily and I read a lot, and we started talking about, oh, you must read this book, you must read that book. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there, so we did a pretty good job of finding what there was. And we shared online resources, books, theories, everything we could find. We talked a lot about our feelings. I've been a lifelong researcher of emotions, and Lily is an absolute natural with emotions. So we talked a lot about feelings and how it impacted us, and how there just wasn't a good place for us to be resourced. And we thought, this is just wrong. Partners need a place to go to that's not a 12-step meeting, because we'll talk about some of the limitations of 12-step. So we came across the trauma model, thanks to Marcia Means and Barbara Steffen, and it was life-changing for us. So we decided to put a website together to offer women what we had coalesced and we're continuing to coalesce, and with the trauma model in mind. The difference being the 12-step model says that partners are either codependent or co-addict. And I can guarantee you that my partner was an addict long before I met him. He's an addict long after I left him, and I had no co in that. In fact, I was a really good cover for him for a long time. And to be called a co-addict, to be called complicit in what he was doing, once I discovered what it was, enraged me. And I didn't think it was fair. In fact, we can talk about the way the therapeutic community deals with partners and misreads their trauma frequently because they just don't know. It's a young field, and basically we partners are teaching the therapists right now.
Yeah.
So we realize that many of you who are watching never ever wanted to have to watch anything on this subject, and we're really, really sorry and sad that there are so many of us. On the other hand, we are on the cusp of a really big movement. There are a lot of us, and the way we respond to each other in the world will really change how other partners after us are treated and the information they have available. So, as we say in POSA meetings, welcome to the club that no one ever wanted to join. We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, Terry. That was nicely articulated, and yeah, I just want to echo that none of us wanted to be here, but you know what they say, when life gives you lemons, make margaritas. And so we decided to put everything together that we couldn't find. It was really maddening. I just want to underscore.
And lots of big holes in things. I mean, places where, research didn't, quite touch in the center, and what we discovered about the reasons for some of those holes in both information and research and resources was pretty interesting, actually. But
yeah, not at the time. At the time, we were pulling our hair out because at the time you're in trauma. When you just discover what you discover about your partner, and there's also the whole business about this therapist is saying to do it that way, that therapist is saying approach it that way. As a matter of fact, last night Terry and I were talking about how even still today, with all of the research about how addictive pornography is to users, there are still therapists who are prescribing it for couples to spice up their sex lives. And
unfortunately, that's true.
And what we keep seeing in our coaching end of POSARC, which we'll talk about some more too, what we actually do at POSARC, is that very often the partner will be thinking that, oh, it's just, on Friday nights we'll use a video or something to spice things up. And what they come to find out is it may have started innocently enough that way and then quickly became something that, let's just to keep the pronouns simple, the man was then accessing on his own more and more. And in that way, porn becomes the other woman. And so we wanted to talk about that too, actually.
As an introduced part to the relationship, although I would say most of the time what we've discovered is porn predated the relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not, usually there was porn use way before he met you.
Yes.
Way before he met you. And, use may have varied somewhat if you've been in a really long-term relationship and your relationship is older than the internet. You probably have a unique experience of watching maybe, magazines turn into internet, turn into, constant video streaming, right? So, technology has been a double-edged sword for us. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. One of the most, it's really hard actually for me to speak about this without becoming emotional, because the very tool that brought this horrendous addiction into my life and into the life of so many of the, and yours, and into the lives of so many, destroying the entire relationship, taking sexual relations completely out of the relationship in my case for years, and in your case it was non-relational sex, where you were basically being used,
Right.
that when Terry and I got together and pooled our resources and would talk and have tea probably twice a day on the phone,
And sometimes more.
and sometimes more, and all, yeah, emailing and everything else, uh, the day it dawned on me that we were going to use the very tool that brought this pernicious influence and destroyer into our lives was now going to be the very medium through which we would reach so many people. It's just so meaningful to me, because the internet, I believe, like anything, can be a tool or a weapon. And
Beautifully said.
when it's used as a porn delivery system, addicting our men, our women, our sons, whatever it is, our daughters, it is a weapon. That's what we believe. And when it's used to disseminate information and resources to those who are most hurt by this, and as a tool for our activism to get out. I mean, there's one thing about coaching one-on-one, and we do groups and all of that, and then it's another to go out and really affect large groups of people and try to affect policy and all of that. That's all our belief of using the internet as a tool.
Which Porn Harms does a really wonderful job of campaigning on the internet. They've got a great Facebook page. We have a Facebook page also.
Yeah.
Porn Harms has a remarkable email program on letting everyone know about what's going on with one anti-porn effort after another, which senator to write to, what bills are on in Congress. It's Thank you, Porn Harms.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I just want to say that for both of us, because pornography cost us only everything,
It's true.
we're really passionate about it. And we've come to understand that the personal quickly becomes the global,
And political.
and the political. And for me, porn cost me not only my relationship, but my relationship to myself, my own sexuality, my own self-esteem, my body image. My relationship with my family and friends was affected because I felt so shut down and ashamed and isolated and basically freaking out about it, that I didn't want to be around anyone, because I have really great friends and family, and I knew they would take one look at me and say, what the heck is going on? And I was just terrified to be told, well, you have to leave him right now. This is crazy. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I couldn't even think through the next 5 minutes. That's how in shock I was for a really long time. And so, you know, the whole thing about porn taking everything from you, and
the intensity of feelings. I mean, it's like nuclear feelings. It's not you're a little anxious. It's like stick your finger in the wall anxiety constantly. And then there's anger and fear, and so many things are piled on top. Our systems are just not meant to hold that high-powered emotions. I want to go back to something that you were talking about, and that's the influence of family and friends, and how, you know, in their attempt to support you sometimes actually compound your trauma.
yeah, please speak to that.
I know that you were saying that you were afraid that your family and friends would say, well, you have to leave him. And some family and friends say, well, you have to put up with it, when that isn't right for you. And sometimes leaving isn't right for you, but yet they want you to do that. And sometimes, you know, that everyone has advice, but until you've been in the position where you're watching an addict flush your relationship totally down the drain, you have no idea what it's like. That it is so indescribable. If someone would have told me what this was like before I experienced it, I don't believe I would have really understood the depths of it. I would have understood approximately, but until you're really in the position, you're really walking that razor's edge every minute of every day, and there's no escape. There is no escape. Everything that you believed in, everything that you thought was true and valued and sacred, loses everything. and you question everything. I remember one day I put a pair of shoes on, I was getting ready to walk out of the house, and I had to look at my shoes 3 or 4 times to make sure I had the same 2 shoes on, because I questioned whether I had the same pair on.
Wow, that's seriously
And I
checked out.
exactly, and I kept double check. I thought, I know I've checked my shoes, and then I check them again, and it's so that once the questioning starts, it's a cascade of questioning. Everything's questioned, and
Yeah.
it's a very difficult way to function.
Well, and it's that trauma that you're describing through a personal narrative right now that helped us to see why using the trauma model in our treatment approaches for coaching and for groups is really critical to our healing. Because what Terry was just describing with not even knowing if she had the same two shoes of a pair on, we have a term for that now. It's called the keys in the freezer and the mail in the bread box. I mean, everything just goes topsy-turvy because your whole reality is so turned upside down. And that's trauma. That's what trauma does. And so what compounds that trauma is that it generally repeatedly happens over and over. So even if you confront the porn user in your life, there's no respite, because they'll either say, okay, I'll stop, and then you'll find out that was not true, or they tell you you're insane or prude or crazy or conservative or controlling, or, you know.
I'm thinking it might be a good time to read the 9 Juice piece
Oh, yes,
on
I would love to.
how porn affects relationships.
Yes,
It's
I'll
just
do
a
that.
wonderful.
Let me grab
I
that.
think it's overdue. 9 Deuce has a blog called Rage Against the Man Sheen. That's MAN-CHINE. And she has done a series on porn, and this particular one is on the effects of porn on partners. And she pretty much sums up our experience very well in these paragraphs.
Why don't you give me a minute, because something's missing here.
Okay.
Laptop. So actually, you know what? While I'm getting that up,
Okay.
why don't we?
Let's talk about what POSAs
Yeah.
need. It is one of the things we've discovered is there's such a confusion of information out and available in the world about what they need. Your therapist may say one thing, a 12-step group says another, your partner's therapist may say something else, your partner says you don't need anything, you should just get over it. What are some of the other things? You get all this variety of advices on what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But what we've discovered is that partners have some pretty concrete needs. The first thing they need to be is validated. It hurts. It hurts to the depth of your soul.
Yes.
And I think we probably ought to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, sure.
What happens inside of you when you realize that your partner is using porn? I mean, what did you...
Well, one thing I want to say as we delve into the real visceral terrain here of what and how porn hurts so specifically to partners, is that this is probably our primary role as coaches, is to hold this for partners. And hearkening back to what you said a few minutes ago, because so much of society and even your family and friends may not agree with your stance on pornography use in your relationship, you could be up against a whole lot of negatives. And so the really key thing, that one of the key things we do is help you hold that peace against incredible odds sometimes. Like right now, I have a client, and I do have permission to speak about this, who is absolutely falling apart because she's just found out about her husband's pornography use, which predates the marriage by a decade at least. And she went to her sister And her sister said, so what? Deal with it.
Minimized it.
Totally minimized it, right. Her mom said, well, all men do that. And her best friend said, justified it. And her best friend said, so what? Why don't you either look at your own or join him?
Yeah.
And then she
It's
went
a
and
total
found,
negation.
it's a negation, right. And then she found a therapist who said, well, I think you have self-esteem issues, that this is a problem for you. And so this poor woman reached out, and I just noticed that as much as I'm trying to give her that validation, she's,
Can we talk a little bit about that self-esteem piece?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think this is where a lot of women take a term like self-esteem and or self-worth, and we get hung up on it because it doesn't have a specific meaning. But certainly porn has a relationship to it no matter what it means to you.
Mm-hmm.
What porn does is it attacks us both as women and as relational beings. So if you were to introduce yourself, for instance, I would say, hi, I'm Terry, I'm, you know, this is what I do, and this is who I'm related to, and you know, these are my relationships. I would say, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I just described myself as a wife, a woman, and in relationship to this man. So I said my gender, I said my relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what porn does. Porn goes in and attacks you at the gender level because it puts you in a place where you're no longer the only sexual being in the man's life. And we'll maybe talk about that a little bit later, but it attacks, we think of ourselves first as gender, and as women we tend to think of ourselves as gender and then who we're related to.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly porn attacks the relationship. Why does he have this relationship with this porn? Why is this so important to him?
Right.
What, you know, am I not enough? You know, what did I do? What can I change? And then we're told at this point we might have self-worth image or self-worth issues, when that's not true. We've been attacked at the most fundamental place that we live, which is our gender and our relationships. And that's where we work on the validation. We're not going to tell you you have a self-worth issue.
Yes.
Because what you need is validation that your very foundation has been shaken.
That's such a key piece,
Yeah.
Terry. I'm really glad that you highlighted that. It's also what we find in our coaching. I'll speak for you here, if I can, and
Sure.
correct me if I'm wrong. Is that even after so much of the healing work is done in terms of providing structure, what does the partner need to do to get to safety, to create boundaries, to create non-negotiables, to provide for herself, possibly financially in a divorce or whatever is going to happen in that particular case, that the residual effect of the partner's pornography use on her will be a shattered sense of her own self-worth. So that to me is the classic Exhibit A example of what you just talked about, that hitting you in your gender place. And it's just, I mean, for myself, I always thought I was an attractive woman. I always did.
She's a beautiful woman.
But thank you. But I just never stopped questioning it after the pornography use was discovered and continued secretively for years, and was covered up, of course. You know, you just keep coming back to that question: if I am beautiful or pretty or even desirable, why is he doing this?
Right.
You know, why is he doing this? And
the validating even your doubts about that was really critical for you.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a lot of what tossed us into all the research, is trying to make sense of that. And so that is a lot of what I find in my work with women can be the most difficult to repair piece of all. Mm-hmm. Is no matter, you could do all of this healing work and it still can often default to, yeah, but if I really were all that, why would he be looking at this, that, or the other.
And especially, do you want to talk a little bit about the piece where, the porn usage is so different from,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how especially invalidating that can be?
Yes, in my own experience and in a lot of what I hear from clients who come to us, or just women who write to us, there will be a discovery of pornography that features predominantly one ethnicity. Is that what you're talking about?
Ethnicity or fetishism.
A fetish.
Yeah,
Right.
it's something that's clearly not you, and you cannot be.
Absolutely. You just are left with this feeling of, it doesn't matter anymore. Nothing matters in my relationship because clearly he has a penchant for
Right.
X, fill in the blank. And so whether it's same-sex pornography, or a different ethnicity, or very young girls, or whatever it is, you are just left with this just sense of yourself as, kind of like
you can't get there.
you can't get there.
Right.
It's like
I can't be younger, a different race.
right.
Stilettos would never do that to me. Whatever you would, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
There are some things that are, no matter if you would try, you couldn't be there, and that is especially defeating.
It's very defeating. Yeah, I just heard from a woman who said she walked in on her partner who had a ritual in the shower, and he would tape up images. And I won't get graphic, but I will say that whatever ethnicity this woman is, what his penchant was the polar opposite. And she just gave up. She said that was the day that she stopped investing emotionally and started to pull out of that long-term partnership, because she realized there's no way I can ever even hope to measure up, or what I call, I get to be the consolation prize behind door number 3. Because what he really wants is this, but he'll settle for just little old me. Devastating to a partnership.
It's really, really painful.
Really painful.
And when a partner will put images, whether they're static or moving, as being more important to him than your relationship, that's another level of, it's not only can you not sexually connect, but also you can emotionally connect.
Right.
And
because what is he really saying there?
Right. Everything about your relationship is subsumed to this predilection to use porn. So it's really devastating.
Yeah.
So
and
we need validation around that piece. So that's one of our.
Yeah, and I also want to say that I personally always really resented that too. It's like I don't even want to be in that ballpark of thinking about this, of am I enough, or do I look like that, or if I starve myself or get surgery or dye my hair. It's like you find yourself thinking like that without even wanting to, and then I get resentful and I think, why am I thinking like this? And yet I see it in all my clients, not all, but almost all.
So what I hear you saying, is that porn dehumanized you, and you weren't using it.
Oh no, I wasn't using it.
It reaches beyond the porn user. It affects us, and it takes a lot away from us.
Yeah, and it's just really, really creates a sense of despair when over and over again your partner enacts a sense of entitlement to use what he feels he would like, or as an addendum, or whatever.
And believes that it's not affecting the relationship, because most users, in fact almost all users, will say it doesn't affect you. I've got it compartmentalized over and away. Now, anyone that understands Emotions 101 knows that, or even Human Beings 101, knows that you cannot segregate one part of your life and have it not affect other parts of your life. You can't cheat on your taxes and have it not affect your ethics in life. You can't use porn and have it fail to affect your relationship.
Yes.
However, addicts will tell you that indeed that is the case. We know it's not the case, and it does affect us. So we're sitting there with the truth. We know the truth. We know we're affected, and there's no one to talk to, which brings us to the second thing that we need is empathy.
Well,
Where do we usually try to get that empathy from, Lily?
Well, I also just wanted to just put the capstone on that last piece and say that it's really tempting to get into these sort of logical discussions with your partner, the porn using partner, and try to explain all of this to him, and it's really, really maddening when they will go into it's not affecting us, it's just not affecting us. And to that, when it starts to get convoluted and they try to trip you up with this verbal swordplay and all of that, I just say everybody knows, crack open any book on relationships and you will see that the number one erosion or eroder of intimacy is dishonesty. So if you are using pornography secretly in your relationship, or you promised to stop and you haven't stopped, you are eroding the intimacy in your relationship.
Exactly. And the
It's
trust.
just that simple.
It's a
And the
betrayal.
trust, right? And so, we can make all kinds of arguments, but I will fall down on that very simple fact that you cannot be, like your example of the taxes, you cannot be inherently dishonest in your relationship and still be in an intimate relationship with your partner. You cannot do it. Something will suffer there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's looking really good. Can I have a sip?
It's for you.
Oh, it's for me. Thank you.
Which brings us to the next piece, which is empathy. And unfortunately, we partners tend to try to get empathy from the addict. We just know that if we can either get him to understand how we feel or make him feel the way we feel, it'll fix everything.
Mm.
How does that work, Lily?
Not real well.
Have you seen it work ever?
What I have seen is false empathy. I've seen the placating kind of sexual compulsive who will get so scared that his wife or partner is going to leave that he'll say, I'm sorry, you're right, it was terrible, but it's hollow because he's going right back to it.
And it doesn't soothe her.
Not at all.
And then she feels bad because she thinks she got what she wanted, but it wasn't the real thing, so, okay.
Yes, and that's probably, after the wreckage of self-esteem for the partner, that's probably the second, I think it maybe ties with first, is the most difficult piece of being a partner, is that you want justice. You want the person who has hurt you and cheapened this thing that you have forsaken all others for him. You want him to undo this pain, to understand you.
Right.
And to say, oh my goodness, you're right. How could I have done this? Is so crazy. Honey, I love you. Let me undo this. How can I make this right? And from our experience of years with this, that never happens. Now, if you're lucky enough that he gets into recovery, real solid recovery, and we outline that on our site, it takes a good 3 to 5 years of solid recovery not for some empathy to come, but for the addict to fully be able to inhabit that empathy body that is probably in there. But so often right after discovery, the partner will just clutch at him and say, you hurt me, undo this, help me and the addict is checked out and will continue to retreat. And so that's where we come in.
Right. One thing that's especially frustrating is when the addict will be empathetic to everyone but his partner.
Ooh, ouch.
And it's almost taunting that way, which, kind of sets up a bad cycle. However, empathy is what we need. And we need to set up support systems for ourselves who understand what we really need and really can empathize and mirror our feelings with us, which is very validating as well.
Yes.
So as posters, we learn to find our empathy in other places. And actually, they're very enriching. It's a very life broadening experience to have to say, I realize I can't get the empathy I want from the person that I most want it from. I am going to have to find empathy for myself and from others in new ways in my life. And it is a remarkable experience, although it can be pretty fraught with pain at first. So empathy is certainly part of the
Yeah.
cornerstones that we need for recovery for ourselves.
I also wanted to just insert a little piece that occurred to me just now as you were speaking, Terry, which is that in the restorative justice movement, it's very well understood that in the case of sex offending, that an offender will only fully come to his healing and his restoration if he can understand empathetically the experience of his victim. And I have actually met with therapists who do this work in prison. It's just remarkable work, and there's a way that they work to get the offender to really sink into the experience of the pain he has brought to his victim, and then the healing can actually progress. And yet, in our community of the sexual recovery community and so on, there are so many therapists who will treat the addict, if the addict ever even gets into treatment, with kid gloves. And
Why is that, do you think?
why is that? Well, there's lots of reasons for that, I think, but just one of them is that addicts are fragile in the beginning. Their drug, their safety net is being taken away from them, and they're angry and they're freaked out and they're scared and they're all kinds of things. And so we're not saying this is a pretty picture. It's difficult for the addict as well. So we also have to have empathy for the addict. But the business about when the addict is too coddled in therapy, and it can be sometimes a year or two before the partner's even considered. Now, that is fortunately in the process of change, and it's one of the areas of our advocacy where we're really trying to get representation for the partners.
Right.
Because you can't move on with your life or even live in your life with that addict, whether he's in recovery or not, until you get that empathy piece.
Right. And not only the person receiving the empathy, but the SAC really living into empathically understanding what his actions have created in the relationship.
Yeah.
It's really probably, I mean, I'm going to have to take a stab at it. I'd say it's probably more healing for him to get that piece than it actually is for us to get it, even though we seem to make, the motions to move to empathy more so than addicts do.
Definitely.
So what's the next piece we need?
The next piece we need is information. And information can be books and videos and seminars and coaching and just really solid information about lots of things. One of them is what sex addiction is. What is sexual compulsion? What drives this thing? What does this look like? And then, of course, there are all the other topics.
Right. There's basic psychology and relational dynamics. Attachment theory is an exciting place to be looking at right now in relationships and addiction, as it appears that much of addiction itself is a trauma-based disorder and an attachment disorder. So there's a lot of information that is really good to have to understand, how we got here, which is, you well know, how we got here really determines where we go from here. If you fail to understand the path, then you won't understand, moving forward. However, not everyone is always ready for information at first, we've discovered.
Right. And that's because the
trauma is just, we're too busy checking to make sure we have the same shoes on. So one of the important things that a coach does is kind of measure all these different pieces and make sure that the client gets the information when the information is necessary, the empathy when the empathy is necessary, and validation and validation and validation and empathy. It's just there's just a lot of doing those pieces, and that is always done, almost always done with in a therapeutic setting as well. Therapy is another important piece, and there's a difference between coaching and therapy.
Yes, that's a big difference, and we are coaches, but therapy can also help you get more to the childhood roots of
your personal issues.
Right.
And coaching is very good for keeping everything in tandem, keeping the therapy with the information, with the empathy, with the validation, because we've been through it, and this is a new field. I mean, this is something that has to, it's as much intuition as information at this point. And it takes an individual case-by-case approach.
Well, that's the thing too. It's not a cookie-cutter approach because there are as many different types of partners as there are addicts, and therefore, when we coach, it's really on a one-on-one, taking everything into account about the history and the whether there's children, and I mean just everything. It just changes. One variable changes and the whole picture changes.
And helping the client understand what she really wants from it.
Yeah, right.
Because a lot of times she hasn't asked those questions for a while, and given the new information of the porn use or the addiction, she may want to re-ask some questions she hasn't asked previously.
And get some support while she's asking that. So now we're back to the support. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about just real briefly is that for those who either can't avail themselves of coaching or for whatever reason that's not a road they want to travel down, we also have groups.
Group coaching,
yeah, group coaching, and we use a workbook, and that moves the POSA through a whole lot of steps towards healing, and that's often really wonderful, is that structure. So it's a kind of a two-pronged thing. It's the structure of knowing, oh, and next week we're going to work on non-negotiables, and the week after that we're going to work on
creating
safety, whatever it is, combined with this real sisterhood, or if there are men in the group, just this real camaraderie. Thank you. That's the word. And lifelong friendships are formed like that because you just you're. It's sad to say that the bond is pain. That's the shared bond, but you do get so close.
There's a vulnerability in that pain. You know, the pretenses that we walk around with every day are not there in these groups, which, by the way, on our website we have information for starting your own POSA group. We have downloadable PDFs with all the information, so if you would like to start your own trauma-based group, it's inexpensive.
But if you're in too much trauma yourself right now, and this is a new discovery, and you don't feel that leading a group would be great for you, there are already, and these are, by the way, these are all, I should say, teleconference, so that we can actually be all over the country and call in at a designated time and all participate. And it's just so wonderful to be able to retract that need for the offending partner to listen and hear you and heal you, and just to pull that off of them and go to your group with it. And it's really almost paradoxical, isn't it, that in our doing that, you actually unwittingly force the addict to either get recovery or not. But it's not about you propping them up because they have to, because you're falling apart. You get that from your group and your coach.
That's true.
So really big emphasis on the support, and it could, besides coaching and groups, it can also be your church, or if if you have sisters, girlfriends, anyone who's really in your corner with this.
Right.
You know? So we are going to find out, are there, okay, let's see, what do we have here? We have, that's
a
pretty,
good. That's a good one.
you wanna-
We've got an email that says, 100 years ago, men were advised to beat their wives with a stick, and hopefully therapists providing porn, prescribing porn to help relationships will go the way of that stick. I could not agree more. I think that's a very uninformed way to attempt to make a relationship better. That is probably a therapist that took their training a long time ago, number one, and has no idea what porn is like now.
Mhm.
And number two, it is probably a therapist that has a limited understanding of any kind of depth of intimacy, because the most you're going to get from using porn to spice up your relationship is a temporary surge and then a really hard crash afterwards. That's the best you're going to get from it.
Mm.
It's bad advice. It is. I'm with you, Lindsay. That is a horrible thing, and I hope the stick beats that advice to the ground. So.
Yes. Thank you for that. That's Lindsay in the UK. Thank you so much for sending that in.
Thank you, Lindsay.
It's a wonderful anecdote. And we will also be back here next Thursday evening at 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So after the kids are tucked in bed, you can get right back on the Facebook live stream event. And we will be not doing a presentation then, we will just be answering questions. So if you could email them to us at info, I-N-F-O, at posarc, P-O-S-A-R-C.com. We can have a look at those during the week and sort through them and answer those for you next Thursday night, April 26th. Is that correct? Next Thursday evening, April 26th at 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Anything else?
I think that's it. I certainly want to thank Porn Harms once again, and thank you for tuning in. We're going to do at least 2 more chats, partner chats, so please do send suggestions, questions. We were thinking maybe we would spend maybe half of a session next time on resources, books that we've enjoyed, videos or movies that things that were particularly good about helping us understand the terrain that we're navigating.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, we can kind of riff on that, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. If you have other ideas, we'd love to hear about them. Again, just write to us at info@posarc.com. And also, because we're having some technical difficulties with the printer, we never got to read that wonderful piece I had in mind. But it is reprinted in its entirety on our blog. It's the 2nd or 3rd blog post down, and it's called, I believe it's called Introducing Nine Deuce, How Porn Hurts Us. And it is an absolutely stellar piece. I cannot recommend it highly enough because you're talking about resources and things that helped us. And it is so clear and so concise and so unapologetic to the heart of the issue, what we're talking about today, that I highly recommend it. So go to www.posarc.com, and right on the top navigation bar you'll see our blog, and you can just click on that and scroll through, and we've got all kinds of great blog posts there, but that one is just it's a crowning
superb.
It's
It really
superb.
is.
It's
It
superb,
really
and
is.
we really want to say thank you to Nine Deuce for allowing us to reprint that.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate you spending the afternoon with us.